welcome to another episode of Fully Charged News. Now, when a new car is released, there's often a bit of a kerfuffle about it. There has been a bit of a kerfuffle. Let's face it, there's been a bit of a Twitter meltdown. There's been a bit of a massive jump to conclusions before any evidence is in, huge amounts of hypothesizing, damning reports, absolute doom and gloom. Let's jump on the bandwagon and start shouting about this. It's not fair to consumers. We're being duped, ripped off and conned by massive multinational global corporations. Marvellous. Well, I've even been accused of being a Nissan stooge and of backing up electric vehicles no matter what is going on, and everything is awful and it's all dreadful and it's quite often all my fault. So, before I go any further, there's a few things I really want to say about Fully Charged that are really important. One, electric cars are not the solution to all the world's woes. They're not going to make that much difference. If we replace all the petrol cars we've got now with electric cars in, say, the next 20 years, we've still got massive problems to deal with. Congestion, parking, where do you charge them? Oh my God, it's awful. No, electric cars won't solve the problem. They're still cars, they're still made in big factories, they still use enormous amounts of materials that have to be dug up out of the ground and transported and refined and turned into the materials that we use. So all that stuff is exactly the same as the cars we use now and all the transportation systems and in fact all the technology we use now. But the only difference is when we're using them, one, they last a lot longer than everyone predicted. They last a lot longer than internal combustion engines, all that stuff. I've talked about all that on Fully Charged before. But the main crux is what we're trying to do and what the whole point of Fully Charged is to look at and encourage the development of technologies that don't require us to burn as much stuff as we burn now. Because the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago was all about burning stuff. It was either coal or then it was oil and then it was gas and now it's nuclear fuel. It's always burned stuff to produce the energy we use to do the things we want to do. And what's been developing in the last 20 years, but in particular the last 5 years, is technologies that are cheaper, that operate for longer and that don't burn stuff. And that's really the main key. And an electric car it isn't always, but it can be driven without burning stuff. And that very simple fact is that underlying theme of Fully Charged. So what happened was, on the day that we released our Nissan Leaf video, the one that we shot in Tenerife, on that very day, a very good friend of the show, a man called Jonathan Porterfield, revealed that he was having problems rapid charging his brand new 2018 40 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf. Now, just to explain who Jonathan is, he's an extraordinary man. He lives on the island of Orkney. He delivers cars there, electric cars, from all over the country. On this particular occasion, he was driving from Leicester, which is in the British Midlands, up to Orkney, a journey of about 620 miles. He's done this journey countless times in countless electric cars. He really knows what he's talking about. He rapid charges them on the way up. He's got different routes that he uses. And on this particular occasion, he got in the new Nissan Leaf, and I'm assuming, I don't know this for sure, but I'm assuming it was fully charged when he got in it. I'm sure it was. He's a very sensible guy. He drove it for the first 150 miles, I'm guessing, somewhere around that region. The new Nissan Leaf has a WLTP range of 160 miles, which is the most realistic range you can get. So say, first 150 miles, drives that, gets to a rapid charger, plugs it in, charges it, everything normal. Drives another, say, 140, 150 miles, stops again, charges again, no problem, absolutely normal, everything you'd expect, charging at 50 kilowatts from a rapid charger. Then drives another, say, 150, 130 miles, I don't know exactly how far he went, plugs it into a rapid charger again, and now there's a problem. On the third rapid charge, it wouldn't take 50 kilowatts, it would only take 22, something like 22 kilowatts, which is much, much slower. So it takes much longer to charge the car. In fact, instead of 30 minutes, 40 minutes, which is what we'd normally do, it was destined to take 4 hours. So this is a real problem. Now, why does this happen on this car and not loads of other electric cars? A good example is I drove from London to Edinburgh in 2014 in a 24 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf, so almost half the battery size, and we recharged that car 8 times on that journey using rapid chargers, because obviously it wouldn't go as far between each charge, and there was no problem with the battery. It charged at 50 kilowatts every time we used it. And Jonathan knows very well that he's driven every type of electric car you can possibly imagine, and he's recharged them all the way up, and it's absolutely fine, and they all work. Now, The original Nissan Leaf has no thermal battery management, and I think that is potentially a problem. Nissan have decided not to do it. It does exist on the ENV200, their electric van, which uses exactly the same drivetrain, but there is thermal battery management. What is thermal battery management? It's in all other electric cars. So for instance, if I drive up to a supercharger in my Tesla, plug it in, not always, but very often I can hear fans running under the car, which are maintaining the right temperature for the battery, either cooling it or warming it up. Generally cooling it, because batteries get hotter when you charge them rapidly. For whatever reason, they've decided Nissan haven't put this in the Nissan Leaf. That may be the problem, but it also may not. It may be another completely different problem. It may be something to do with the software. It may be something they can solve quite easily. We don't know yet. We don't know. Now, we really don't know the circumstances of what happened to Jonathan and the Nissan Leaf he was driving. There's also been someone else who's reported a similar thing. So it's clearly a bloody problem. I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm just trying to put the problem into context. But here's a press release that Nissan sent me yesterday. And it says, before launch, the 40 kilowatt-hour Nissan Leaf went through rigorous testing procedures where development vehicles were driven in numerous European countries for more than 100,000 kilometers. We found the Leaf performed well in range of both rapid and standard charging scenarios and was in line with our expectations. I suppose it would be. We are aware of 2 isolated cases where customers have experienced issues with public rapid charging units. We are currently investigating these cases with both the customers and the charging unit providers. So that's all we know at the moment. And I know they are in touch with Jonathan and another individual, I'm not sure who that is. Now, contrary to what many people have said to me on Twitter, I will be following up this story and I will try and find out what's going on. Now, I just want to end on a high note, in fact, a 260-metre high note. GE have just announced the launch of the Halide X, which is a 12-megawatt offshore wind turbine, which produces 45% more energy than previous models of wind turbine. Now, this is mainly because it's bigger. And that's what engineers have discovered. The bigger the wind turbine, not only the more electricity it produces, which is fairly obvious because it's just bigger, but also the more wind it can capture. So it can operate in lower wind speeds, it can operate in higher wind speeds, it can operate for longer. It's actually running for far more of the time than the smaller wind turbines that were first put offshore. When the wind turbine blade is at the top of the arc, it's at 260 meters or 820 feet for American viewers. That is extremely high. It's an enormous span of blades, which means it captures more wind and produces more electricity. 12 megawatts is enough to run 5,000 American homes from one wind turbine. So this really is a colossal step up. And it is what they've been talking about for a long time, that wind turbines will get bigger and bigger as they understand the engineering challenges. And these things are amazing. I mean, they're out at sea where it's always windy, but occasionally horrendously windy, and they can survive those winds. So to put this in perspective, when we went to the Burbo Bank extension in Liverpool Bay, when we flew over there, we saw all these massive wind turbines out in the bay. They stood at 195 meters or 620 feet. And they produce 8 megawatts. So they are currently the biggest that have been installed. And their blades are something like 80 meters long, each individual blade. Well, the new wind turbines, the blades are over 100 meters long. Each blade is over 100 meters long. They really are jumping up the size enormously. So these are going to be installed over the next few years. First ones will be online in about 2021. So, you know, this is massive engineering that we're talking here. So that's all I've got time for this time. I just want to give a quick shout out for a few Patreon supporters who donate $10 or more a month to keep this show going. I just want to say a big thank you to Neil Butler, Tim Connolly, Jason Eslick, James Brody, Mark Illiff, and Anders Patrick Jorgensen. Thank you so much for your incredibly generous support. We really appreciate it. Please do subscribe to Fully Charged. Please have a look at the Patreon link if you're interested at all. And as always, if you have been, thank you for watching.